put up. It's kind of difficult to hold them, but these are actually the books. These are the books that I was able to read for 2025. So I have to be careful because I fell down earlier. So I'm just gonna place them right here. Okay. So I've been reading a lot since I left teaching. Compared before, it would be a blessing to read 10 books, but now that I'm a student again, it's kind of um, going to be a mixture of that. So I don't think I'll be able to read as much as last year, but at the same time, I will be reading still a lot. But now I am able to read something that is more than I thought I could have ever read, or something like that. So anyway, just to put this into perspective, these books actually tell where I was for a really long time. Like for that long period of time, 365 days, there were a lot of things that happened to me, and these books were there with me, and they somehow share the same story. So for example, the very first book that I read is Bridge to Terabithia. I've had this book for 6 or 7 years probably, because I bought this with my when I was going to meet my friend in Manila. It was way before the pandemic when I bought this, and I have never opened it until January of 2025. So when I finally decided to read it, it was really refreshing and it was really cathartic, because the beauty of this version, this special 40th anniversary edition, you can actually read the thoughts of the writer, which is Catherine Patterson, and how she expressed the importance of keeping all of the details of Bridge Therapy as it is, even though it is marketed for children. Like, why is it important to include all of those um, sub concepts or like dialogue? Why were they important? Because it's a necessarily no it's a necessary thing to be dealt with when you are a child or a children or growing up. So you don't want to take that emotion away from the kids. It's a really important part that they must learn, whether the easy way or the hard way. Either way, it's going to happen. So it's really a beautiful tale, and I do love this book. It's just that I prefer the movie. I think the beauty of this book is it managed to show more character with the other side characters in the story, but at the same time, there's something beautiful about the movie that just absolutely gives justice to a lot of scenes in this book. Like, I know that this opens up for a lot of imagination, especially with how the story goes, but I do love how it is set in the movie in comparison. So it's not that I'm saying that the movie is much better than the book. It's just that I prefer the movie, but still, this is a good read. It's not that long. You can finish this in 1 or 2 days. It's your choice, but I'll give this a 3.5 out of 5 personally. But I really enjoyed this one. It's a good way to start the year actually. And speaking of like a 1 day or a 2 day read, what I did was I decided to go to Cubao because they say all roads lead to Cubao, and I brought this book with me. This is Fyodor Dostoevsky's White Nights. It is my third time reading it, and that's probably going to be the last. And the reason behind that is because I finally realized or understood what this truly meant. And just to put this in perspective, I've fallen in love with my notes for the underground from the underground book because of this particular short story. It was included. I mean, a lot of people love notes, but I prefer White Nights. There's a reason why this particular short story is currently trending, or a lot of people wants to find out what's really special about it. I think, especially for a Filipino, like the idea of longing and not necessarily fantasizing, but romanticizing those things around you, it really embodies it. And the reason why I won't read it again is because I really figured it out from my perspective. Um, I decided to watch 500 Days of Summer right after finishing it, and I was like, that's it. That's it, basically. It's the fact that at the very beginning, just like, is she Nastenka or is it from Alchemist? I've always combined that, but the girl in White Knights is similar to Summer, and how the main character just romanticizes everything, and it's beautiful and it's painful, but the story in it is really really rich, and I really enjoyed reading it again. But I think it really has a different meaning depending on where you are currently in your life. but I really appreciate how I finally got to see it differently and completely. And at first, I thought I was the only one who noticed the connection between White Nights and 500 Days of Summer. I made a video way before, like back in January, about it. But I saw like a comment about it like a few months ago, also mentioning that same argument. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. Like, there's something about it that just makes it really, really special. So I really liked it. I don't know if it's gonna work for everybody, but for me, it's a 5 out of 5. You could read it in one go, like an hour or two. You could finish it, and you can have different points of view in it. That's the beauty of it. A lot of people liked the story. Some people might question how much this guy is romanticizing things, and I think that's the beauty of it all. The way that it was handled there in the story. Dostoevsky is really, really, really something in terms of writing longing. There's something about him with that particular kind of genre. And the next thing I have here, wait, excuse me. Okay, I cannot edit this anymore, please. I'm exhausted. And anyway, the third one is actually Catcher in the Rye. Of course, a lot of people already knows this book, probably have read it already. It's actually a gift from one of my fleeting friends. I don't know why they what it's not fleeting. It's like one of my friends who this appears and disappears whenever she wants. We're like that. But with that particular friend, she gave me two books, and those are actually the two books that I read consecutively. And I started first with Catcher in the Rye. I also read this back in January. I was reading a lot back in January because I was still in call center at that time, so I really had a lot of time to just read. Now, the reason why I want to talk about this book in particular is I forgot what Catcher in the Rye is all about, except for the fact that when I sat down and thought about it when I was writing my journals for the books, I figured it out quickly. I remembered all of the things what I wanted to not necessarily forget about it, but it's because it's my life. I really enjoyed this book because it gave me a cathartic feeling of looking back and all of the stupid shit I did when I was young. And respectfully, it's kind of a spoiler, but if I'm not mistaken, it's from this book. I really have a bad memory, but I remember that the main character rented a hooker just to vent out. Like my guy was that sad that he just rented out a woman to just vent out his feelings. Okay, that's too much spoiler, but yeah, that's the point. It was really, it's not funny in a funny sense, but just like men will literally do anything but therapy, and it's kind of insane. And you watch this guy just throw his life away at that age, and you're like, if you're a guy who went through that, you might see it like, yeah, he's getting through it, but not everybody survives that part. I barely survived that part of my life. But to read it is actually cathartic because some of those shits that he did is similar to what I did. Not the same, but similar. It's kind of insane. Like how you resort to all these bad things is to, you know, feel something. But the beauty of it all is you can see hints of humanity still left in him in terms with his relationship with his sister, if I'm not mistaken. Again, if I'm not mistaken, this is the book where they went to a museum. So there's still something in him. And I think it's a really important kind of piece to be read, especially it's like a coming of age book. I think that's the correct genre that I could put this into. I really loved how it paints this image of this story. It's cathartic, but at the same time, it's really the reader who puts an ending to it, if that makes sense. For me, I, am here, so I survived. But again, not everyone does. This is an insane book. I really love the writing here. I'm reading it a 4 out of 5. So I really enjoyed this one. And it's followed by actually the next book is the same again, the gift from my friend. This is Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray. This book is absolutely difficult for me. I don't know why, or maybe it's because I was on the verge of collapsing during February. I read this back in February because I finished reading this February 22nd, the day that I sent my resignation letter, or I had my no, that I had my like start of my rendering of one whatever. It's kind of that basically because I don't want to work in call center anymore. It was hell. But yeah, this one in particular was the book that I read to celebrate like 6 months of being a call center agent. What a goofy guy. But it was difficult for me to read the first 20 or 30 pages of this book. I don't really get what was happening in the beginning until I really sat down to it, well rested, and understood what's really going on. It's a messed up book, really, really messed up. And it's like the chase for perfection, for youthfulness, only to be only to be disappointed by it. You you've been like glazed way too much to the point that you became obsessed with yourself, and that you will do everything and anything just to keep that image, that you want it to be perfect, that it will ruin all of the relationships that you've had with friends, family, loved ones, and so on. But I do think this is a good read. I just don't like it that much. Maybe it's because again it was difficult for me, maybe because of the time, but I really, really find the last parts of this insane and funny. Not funny, again, it's the dark humor in me. I apologize, but it's kind of funny how obsessed he got with himself. But it's a well written story. Not just my, it's that's not my cup of tea. That's why I still rated 3.5 out of 5. But it's really good writing. It's just goofy and insane. But at first, and I mean this kindly and respectfully, you would think that there is going to be like a relationship or whatever for these two people. Like I know during that time being gay is not yet really accepted, but and I realized it's not about being like your sexual orientation. It's about your passion about something. It's different. And if they were gay, it's much more easier to understand. But then they became something else. They became monsters. They're no longer human. They're not man or woman. Like he fell in love with a woman and then be like, nah, I don't like her. He loves his friend and nah, I don't like him. It's kind of a weird dynamic. It's not about gender. It's not about sex. It's not about politics. It's not about that. It's about the obsession of oneself, which is really, really insane. Like imagine being glazed your whole life to the point that you will lose all of these human emotions, feelings. It's just insane. It's kind of lovely that I decided to rest for a moment, and then during my last day at work, when I finally clocked out, I brought this book out with me and finished it in one go. So for 2 or 3 hours, I spent 2 hours, I think, in my in the coffee shop outside our office, and then I went to a coffee shop nearby because I was really, really sleepy to read the ends of it. And I really, really loved The Alchemist. I first read this back in 2019. I think I first finished it 2019 January 1st or something like that. And I really, really love this book, especially the line about the universe will conspire for you. I think that's a really well known line, even though you haven't read it or not. But I decided to read it again at a particular moment in my life because I feel like excuse me, quitting call center and just betting on myself because there wasn't any certainty about my scholarships with my exam with LaSalle if I'm going to get in or not. So I would just like fuck it, let's just go with it. I resigned with no money. That's why my sister and my mom had to cover for me for a few months. But it was really worth it because this book helped me when I was young during my last year in college, and it helped me during my last day of work. And now I'm currently a student, even though especially today, the reason why I'm recording is I feel like shit for some weird reason. I don't know why, but I always remind myself why I really love The Alchemist is that you just have to keep going. The real treasure is not the ending, but the journey in itself. That's why I really love going out and going to do something goofy and just trying everything because this book taught me too that you just have to be patient. You just do what you do. Like the amount of time that the main character did just to save money, just to be his better version, is way too much. And the fact that it's not really about the ending, but the journey, what he learned, what he became, and the friendships, the connections that he made, and that's why I really, really love The Alchemist. I know it's way too much of a goody goody two shoes book, but you need it if you really need something. This is not just a hug, a comfort, but really like a good push. A push that will help you stand up and learn to walk again. I'm giving it a 5 out of 5. really my favorite. I bought a version of this before, but somebody borrowed it and lost it, so I had to buy this version instead. So I really want to have a copy of The Alchemist because again, it's one of my favorite books. Now, speaking of favorite, this is one of the worst books I've ever read, and I'm saying that in the nicest way possible. It's Dante, Divine Comedy. This is hell. It was really hell to read this. This was one of my very first books, probably close to a decade ago when I bought this, or 9 years or 8 years, I don't know. But the thing is, I tried reading this when I was in college and I gave up quickly. I just read like 30 pages and I couldn't do it. And now that I'm an adult, I think it took me a month to finish this hell of a book because this translation is well done. But you know how messed up this book is when in the same chapter the explanation is right next to it. That's how insane this thing is. And, and still with the translation, no matter how watered down the English is, it's difficult because it's poetry, and I get it. But once I managed to get in the groove and actually spend more time reading instead of this one chapter a day or one canto a day, I got to really understand what it's trying to impart. I'm rating it a 4 out of 5 because this is really just like to put it in perspective. It's difficult to rate Divine Comedy one by one because it's an experience, and I made it an experience myself because I wasn't just reading this at home. I don't read at home. I bring this with me. I go to different places, and it's like when you're reading it, you're somewhat living it in a sense. You're journeying with Virgil and Dante as they descend to hell and they see all these demonic creatures, premonitions, or whatever the hell they are, and just get lost in it. So I'm rating it a 4 out of 5. I'll explain my my love for this books later on deeper as I proceed. But I will actually reread it in the next 5 years or so, I guess. I bought this one because this is the version for my Purgatorio and Paradiso. This version is much easier to digest, so I decided to buy this one. This is a verse translation by Alan Mandelbaum. So speaking of that, I have Purgatorio. The reason why I have these two versions because I bought this again like half a decade ago. I was already working at time, and there's an NBS or National Bookstore sale, and these two books were there, so I bought them. So I just got to read them now, and I do think Purgatorio is a really good book too. And I am honest to God, not remembering anything. That's how insane Purgatorio is for me. All I knew is that they descended hell after seeing this gigantic demonic creature, and then they went up and ascended the mountain of Purgatory. Fun fact, I haven't done any hiking, but if I ever will, one of my goals is to climb Mount Purgatory. That's actual name of a mountain in Philippines, in Benguet. So I will try that. But anyway, this Purgatorio is insanely good too, because again, I cannot pinpoint anything from it, but it was in this book that I finally understand why why it is important for Dante and Virgil to see people in there that are well known. Because if they are not well known, then how will you believe it or how will you really understand it? Like to put into perspective, we always love a good story of a coming up story or something that is really well known. Like for example, we love the underdogs like Rocky or Sylvester Stallone, like the background of the story of it. Because there's a lot of underground or underdog stories in there, but if it's not well known, if it's from the unknown, then who cares? It's sad, but it's the reality that it is needed for people with stature, with credibility, with recognition to be the examples in books like these so that you will be able to truly understand what's really going on. So it's kind of fun because I don't really read history. I do have an extensive review of this though in the channel, but anyway, it's kind of funny when you start reading about people that you're aware of. Like for example, again, I rate this 4 out of 5 too. So now I'm heading so that I could give what I really want to say. This is a 5 out of 5 by the way. This is Paradiso. Um, when I reached this part and got to meet Saint Augustine, I was like, oh, that's my boy, because I was an Augustinian. So He's also mentioned in Paradiso. It was really cool. But this one in particular, I do remember a lot because from the first two books, you journey with Virgil and Dante, but now he journeys with Beatrice, and that's one of my favorite plots of this year because I actually journeyed with this book. I decided to finish Paradiso when I went to the sunken church in Pampanga. It's 80 kilometers away from home, and I finished reading it there just to really feel this feeling of paradise. And I love how this entire journey is difficult to understand. It's just like life. It's difficult to understand. There goes ups and downs. You have to question your morality and all that kind of stuff. And then you will be asked the question, what are you willing to let go of, especially your flesh, in order for your soul to be not necessarily purified, but be accepted in the heavens. And there's a reason why I really love this book, especially with how Beatrice is portrayed or written, and how the ending of this book really makes everything worth it. And so, for the last stretch, my last talk about this whole entire thing, I didn't know this too, but I actually bought this again half a decade ago. This is Dante also. This is called Love That Moves the Sun and Other Stars. This is a collection of all the cantos or chapters in Paradiso that includes Beatrice. And the title in itself is the ending that I was talking about in Paradiso. So this is my first time actually annotating on a book. So I have annotations for this one. And it's just beautiful to read it again, and it's kind of like finally making sense of everything. And I really really love Paradiso because it gave me the opportunity to just be one with your faith and just appreciate everything that is written about it. And at the same time, I was really wondering about um, what to read next. Well, the next book that I read was Before the Coffee Gets Cold. Well, actually, I've already read it before, but um, I was out with my friend in my master's, and we were like, "Yo, blah blah blah, this blah blah that," and he was like, "Yo, I want to read this book called Before the Coffee Gets Cold," and I was like, maybe I could buy that for him because it was about to be his birthday in the next couple of days, and he's the one who got me into this masteral degree journey anyway. So as a thank you gift to him, I decided to buy this book. But for some weird reason, I was like, maybe I should read it first. So I decided to read it in 2 days and finish the entirety of it. And I went to these different places, from Cubao to Harbor Square in Manila, to just somewhat embody the story again and just go with it. It's not really a perfect book, but it's relatable. There are some instances where you could pinpoint some inconsistencies and some nonsensical tropes. It's kind of taxing basically when they keep repeating the rules, but you get why they're doing that, to really emphasize the enormity of the things that are going on with the story. But I do think sometimes it's too on the nose or spoon fed, but it's fine. It's a good read. It's relatable. That's why I'm ranking it or rating it a little high as 3.5. But I really did enjoy reading it because I find myself relating to some stuff of it. And then, funny enough, I decided to follow this with one of the most evil books in existence, not because of its demonic nature, but with the insanity that it entails. It's none other than The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli, and it's one of my favorite short reads because you can just read this in a day or two, or in a few hours, basically, an hour or two, and this is insane in a sense that it's basically a manuscript, a full guide on how to be an asshole, how to be a dictator, or some stuff like that. This is basically a collection of all the advice that Machiavelli has given the leaders of that time, and it was put into this kind of structure to somewhat really tell the story. It's how evil it is. But I think the beauty of this book is how it really points out that it's a tale as old as time, and we still somehow do not learn from all the insanity that has gone by. So I think it is important to reflect on that. There's something that should be done in order for all these things to stop
going on the way they're going, because it's not healthy, it's not good, it's really evil. But still, the crowd is somewhat in this, you know, phase. They're still in the zone of being like, oh, these leaders are the best, even though they're one of the, if not the worst people here on earth. But yeah, thank you, Machiavelli. And the next thing that I did was, this is around the month of September, so I really wanted to read something that I really love for my birth month, and I started with Ender's Game by Orson Scott Card. This is one of my favorite books, not necessarily the story, but this specific book in itself. I have been looking for years for this book when I was in college, and I was really broke, and I cannot afford any books that are 100 pesos or something like that. And so I always go to book sales or secondhand bookstores and stuff like that to thrift. But then I finally found it, and here it is. And when I found it, it has some annotations in it, but I didn't really mind because I really want to read this book. And it was really special in the sense that I looked for this book everywhere. And when I finally got to read it, I fell in love with the story and somewhat felt bad that it could have been adapted better in the screens, because I liked the movie when I was young, but I loved the story and the source material more, or I love it more than I would have expected. And it was then that by reading this, it allowed me to somewhat discover that there's a much larger universe in this Ender's Game. It's not the end. It's just the beginning of it. So I do rate this 4 out of 5, because there are cases wherein it's you know way too complex, way too many things going on, but it's it served its purpose in a sense once it's all over. But what it really will lead to is something that is really beautiful. But instead of going for the sequel of this book, I actually decided to read a book that I found also. So similar with my journey with Ender's Game, there are books that I've been looking for everywhere. And there's this particular book that I've been looking for now that I'm older, because I love this animated film. As you can see here, it's Jose the Tiger and the Fish. So in that particular movie, they mentioned Francois Sagan, and I was like, what books should I read? And there's a couple of books by Sagan that were recommended, especially those that were mentioned in the film. But it's not easy to find Sagan's book in the country. And so even though I checked online, fully booked, National Bookstore, there's none of them. But for the first time in years, there's actually one, which is Bonjour Tristesse, which finally, which finally went out there in the wild, and I found it during a time where I barely had any money, but I had to buy it. So I decided to buy this book, and it was one of the gayest book I've ever read. And I use the word gay not in the context of LGBTQIA plus, but in the context of the usage of the word gay to exemplify the word happiness. And then how it went from gay to gray is such a beautiful piece of writing. And it's just that the insanity of this thing, how youthful it is, and how Sagan was 17 or 18 when she wrote this. That's how insane this is. It's like, it's one of the reasons why you have to not take Wattpad away from kids, because one of the best writers out there is just basically a teenager or teenagers in general. This is one of the those books that you just read and just like, what the hell is going, why is she like that? But then you remember, oh yeah, she's a teenager, so she thinks this way and that way. And she was given the reality of life in such a tragic and complicated manner. So I rate this 3.5 out of 5. It's just short, sweet, and to the point, and it's insane. So I really liked it, but I don't think it's for everybody. But Bonjour Tristesse is my very first Sagan book, and I can't wait to read more of them. But that's for later. Speaking of, my favorite book this year is actually something that I've read before. It's none other than the sequel to Ender's Game, which is Speaker for the Dead. And so, if you have read Ender's Game, if you've watched the film, you might think that Speaker for the Dead is the same thing. It's just blasting stuff, spaceships and blah blah blah. But no, Speaker for the Dead is one of the most poetic pieces of writing that I've ever read, and it's really, really beautiful. It's something that I have looked for when I finish reading Ender's Game, and when I found it, I read it and I fell in love with it immediately. The idea of using aliens, or in their case they call it barils, raman, or all those kind of stuff, to distinguish different kinds of no, it's not existential, extraterrestrial life, and how human they are, is the beauty of it all. The actual concept of Speaker for the Dead is something that I really love, and the main character, Andrew Wiggin, only spoke once and wrote once. So it's insane how the title is Speaker for the Dead, but the actual speaking only happened once. And the writing as a speaker only happened once. But it was really beautifully done and written. Even though there's like 20,000 characters here, it all made sense by the end. It's one of my favorite pieces of literature, science fiction, and of course, kind of like philosophical kind of viewing about being human. It's really poetic. I really love it, and it's a 5 out of 5 for me. It's not for everybody, I guess, but you can read it without knowing Ender's Game. But it's much better if you do, so that you will understand why the main character decided to go from becoming an Ender to why the main character decided that from being an ender, he would rather be a speaker. So it's a really beautiful tale about that, and I really loved it. And the next book that I read is again by chance when you're looking for something in the same mall too. I was in Ayala Malls, Manila Bay, and I had I barely had any money, and I was just thinking of what to buy my friends for our Christmas party reunion kind of stuff. And I thought, why not go to Papa Melroti? And there was like get one book, exchange book, something kind of stuff. And the first thing that I saw there is none other than Wonderful Clouds by Francois Sagan. And finally, it's here. This is the book that was actually mentioned in Jose the Tiger and the Fish. This is where Jose got the name Jose. Jose is the main character here, and similar with Bonjour Tristesse, it's this as insane as the other one. But this time around, Sagan is using a character that's no longer a teenager, but a really, really conflicted 25-year-old, I think. I forgot how old she is here. But what's beautiful about this thing is how complex the character is. It's you're following a character that's basically wrong, and I love that kind of story. Instead of having a goody two shoes, it's refreshing to. It's not necessarily that she's the villain, but she's imperfect, really really imperfect, and you follow her arc. And it could have been much easier if she followed the song "In the Middle" by Dodie, but no, she doesn't want that. She doesn't want to be in the middle of two boys. No, she doesn't want that. But Josie is insane and really, really eventful. It's a 3.5 out of 5 for me. Again, it's a short book, but again, it's not for everybody. But for me, I really enjoyed it, and it's just insane. It's just insane. And actually, the last book I read is this one. I don't know if it counts as a book. It's Daredevil Born Again. This is a collection of all these comic runs that really centers around the Born Again storyline by Frank Miller and David Mazzucchelli. Hope I pronounced that correctly. I read this during my December 27 expedition or voyage to Antipolo Cathedral as usual. But there's something really beautiful in this book that took me a while to really digest, but I had the entire day to do so. So when I finished reading it, I was like, was that Born Again? Was that the comics? Was that a comic run that I've been waiting for to read? But then I realized, well, it's a comic run. It's just a fraction of it, and you're just seeing this particular run of stories that centers around Born Again. So I was like, maybe I have to go back to that particular comic, to the exact Born Again comic, to fully understand it. And there it was. I was really, really somewhat awakened by it the second time that I revisited the story and the images of it. And it's basically you're following Daredevil becoming Daredevil without Matt Murdock. It's the idea of stripping Matt Murdock of everything that makes him Matt Murdock. It's like the idea of taking away the other side of the character, what makes him human in a sense, to fully becoming Daredevil, taking away his money, his house, his work, all those kind of things that makes him comfortable, and just become something else, to be born again. And I can interpret it in multiple ways, as if being born again means being stripped off of everything. Because when we are born again, we're basically naked with nothing with us. It's the kind of idea that I got in it. That's why the reason. That's why I actually got my hair shaved. So I thought that was my idea of being born again. I hate myself. This is a really, really good, excuse me, collection, and I really enjoyed reading it because I've looked for this one in particular. This was the book that I bought as a reward for myself when I finally got my scholarship allowance for the first time. And there's a foreword by Charlie Cox, the one who played Daredevil or Matt Murdock in the series. And it's really, really amazing how, after reading it and going back to those memories when I first watched season 3 of Born Again or Daredevil, which is the Born Again storyline, that I was like, my God, that was really beautiful. The idea of it and how it really painted these images is actually insane from the standpoint of the story, no matter how minimal the dialogues are, but with the design, with the drawings in here, it's absolutely insane. This is actually the very first actual collection or comic book or graphic novel or whatever that I've read in full. So I have my Akira's in here, four of them, but I haven't opened them. I have my Watchmen, but I haven't opened it. So I'm keeping those things in check because I really wanted to read first those things that I haven't read yet. So there will be a time that I'll be reading mostly comics and graphic novels, but not yet. This is my first one, so maybe I'll read Akira once I've completed it. But anyway, and so I think I have read 16 different stories, and it encompasses different sections of my life. It's kind of insane. Imagine that when I started this entire journey, I was still in call center reading reading Bridge to Terabithia, and then I ended it with Alchemist, and then when I was jobless, I was in this hell with Inferno, to getting my scholarships, to getting back to school. I got my Purgatorio, and then understanding how life would definitely make sense. I got to Paradiso, and then I went back to my childhood and the insanity of it with Sagan and Andrew Scott, Andrew Orson Scott Card's stories. And so it's really beautiful to be born again. So to think that I've managed to read these books, and it's really, really special to me that I still get to read a lot, especially now that I'm older, and as everybody else is focused on getting ahead of their careers. I'm like more focused on what kind of literatures or art stuff will I dive into next. So far I have not finished a book. It's almost halfway to January, but I'll get there. I'm still adjusting with my sleeping schedule, with my five subjects still not really making sense, even though the school year has already begun, or the term. But yeah, I think reading really helps me a lot because it provides me ideas on how to write and where to go next. That was really, really fun to talk about. And I'm sorry because I've recorded this already, but for some weird reason, this particular half it didn't record with audio, so I have to do it again. That's why there's a change of clothing. But yeah, I just want to have a diary of all the books that I've read and how I feel about them every year, so that if I ever stumble upon or get bored when I'm older, just get back to them like, yeah, maybe I should read that again. So yeah, maybe you have any other books to recommend, please do. I still have 50 books in my library here that I haven't read. I have more than 100 books now, and they're gonna keep growing, so I have to keep reading. So yeah, that's about it. Peace out.